What's up, everybody? Welcome to Rewind 245. We're going to be talking about the best games of 2013, and at the same time, I will be sharing my picks for not just Game of the Year. We'll reveal the Game of the Year much later, but I'll also be talking about things like the best platformer, the best multiplayer, things like that. So kick back and enjoy. One of the first games I played this year was God of War Ascension, and while it was definitely not the best God of War game, it was probably the most fun God of War game. The single player was short but sweet, but the story wasn't all that great. It had its camera problems and such, but to me personally, I had one of the most fluent gameplay mechanics in God of War so far. But the multiplayer wasn't so inspiring. Like I said, it was a good God of War, but definitely not the best God of War. But it was definitely fun, and I think it's worth checking out. Tomb Raider is also one of the first games I played this year, and definitely one of the prettiest games of the year. I would have given it the best looking game of the year, but in terms of environment, it looks really good. But in terms of character models, it doesn't look as consistent. Like Lara Croft herself looks really good, but the other characters don't look as good compared to her. But as a game, it's pretty deep. There's a lot of collectibles. There's a lot of things to explore. You can level up your weapons. It's a pretty deep game, but in terms of story and characterization, I don't think it's as strong. The story's pretty, it just feels made up. It just feels like it's just not good, and the characters are the supporting cast of characters are very uninteresting. They're very one-dimensional, but Lara Croft herself is pretty interesting as she gets put into very struggling situations, and she tries to endure and conquer. So her herself is great. As a game it does well, but as a story element it doesn't do so well, but it's definitely worth checking out. Batman Arkham Origins is a prequel to the other Arkham games. It's still a pretty good Batman game, but definitely not the best, much like God of War Ascension. But the thing is, Batman is still good. It's still like a really solid game, where God of War Ascension had its problems. Batman didn't really have much problems overall. They added a little bit more to the game. They also added multiplayer, much like God of War and Tomb Raider, but from what I heard, is not the multiplayer is not great. It seems like all these multiplayers like God of War and Tomb Raider are passable, but Batman itself has a pretty interesting story. It doesn't give much origins to Bruce Wayne or the Batman, but it gives some interesting elements of the Joker and the relationship between Batman and the Joker. And to me, I will give it the award for best voice acting by Troy Baker voicing the Joker. I thought he did a phenomenal job voicing the Joker. He gave the performance a lot of energy. I think he really filled in the shoes for Mark Hamill very well. It's not the best Arkham game, but it's still really good, and I think it's still worth checking out. Next up is Rayman Legends. I'll give this the best platformer of the year. I feel this is a much more better than Rayman Origins. I like Rayman Origins, but Rayman Legends is much more better. It has much more creativity. The platforming has a much more better balance of, difficulty, but at the same time, it has enjoyment in it. And there's quite a bit of replayability. I'm playing it on the Vita, but even on the Vita, it looks good, it plays well, and yeah, like I said, there's quite a bit of replayability. There's a little thing where you get to compete with other players and compete in like little timed mini games and such. But one of the things that really pop out for me for Rayman Legends is the music levels, and those music levels are very fun to play. Kind of challenging, pretty challenging, but also very fun. Give it the award for best platforming game of the year. Now, next up is The Walking Dead Season 2. I know it just barely came out. The first episode just came out not too long ago, around December. But I'm gonna have to give it the award for best DLC game. I haven't played so many DLC games this year. But I felt it was nice to see the series come back, and it seems like they're heading into a very interesting direction with Clementine. I'm not going to reveal much, but it looks like it's going to have a compelling aspect to survival and the humanity of Clementine. And if you haven't played season 1, I don't know what the fuck you've been doing, but you have to play it. And it looks like season 2 is going to bring some pretty cool things. Number 5 is GTA 5, Grand Theft Auto 5. To me, it wins best sandbox game, or in other words, best open world, and also best multiplayer. And even though its multiplayer had its problems, it's a very deep multiplayer. You can have lots of fun with friends just messing around in the open world, and you can also compete with other people in races and in team death matches and play cooperatively in missions. And I wasn't so impressed with the story in Grand Theft Auto 5, but there's a lot of things to see, quite a lot of things to do. It's the most popular game around. But yeah, best sandbox and best multiplayer. BioShock Infinite, it wins best first-person shooter and best video game twist. Definitely the best first-person shooter in my opinion. Is very fun to play, and it has a really nice twist at the very end. Of course, I will not spoil it. I think it's weird because when it came out, a lot of people were praising it, but over time, people were criticizing it a lot. The way it looked. People were just nitpicking about things about it over time, and I understand some of the nitpicks, but I still think it's a pretty strong game. And with the season pass, it adds a little bit more value. I think it's definitely a solid game. If there's a Game of the Year edition, I definitely recommend you guys check that out. It's going to be free on PS Plus on January, so if you have PS Plus, look out for it. Tearaway, the creative and imaginative game by Media Molecule. To me, it wins for best handheld game and best Vita game. I haven't played many handheld games. I just barely got a Vita, but to me, this is definitely my favorite so far, and my favorite Vita game so far. It's short and sweet. There's a little bit replayability, like decorating your character and making papercraft models. But it's such a very charming game and very beautiful and overall fun. The platforming is good and the combat is okay, but I don't know. There's just a sense of charm to it that really gives that level of fidelity, and it's just so good. The Last of Us, best graphics, best character Ellie, best studio Naughty Dog, and best story. The Last of Us, what hasn't been said about The Last of Us? It's just so good. But there are some people that have their opinions about it. I know my friend didn't like it so much because he thought the gameplay was very boring. And I agree that it's a slow game. So if you're the kind of person who doesn't like games that are very slow and they require a little bit of stealth, then I don't recommend you The Last of Us. But I guess what's really nice about The Last of Us is that it brings a very compelling and very deep story, very dark story, that these characters are surrounded in a very dark world. And not only that, the gameplay is pretty deep, and it's and also very tense. I'm not a big fan of the multiplayer, but the single player itself has quite a bit of replayability. It has a lot of collectibles. You can encounter the combat in several ways. You can encounter it in stealth wise, or just go run and gun. And it's a very solid game. So again, best graphics. I feel graphically is much more consistent. The character models look good, and the environments look good, and the creatures just look eerie. Best character Ellie, she's a phenomenal character. She's probably the strongest female character right next to Lara Croft, but she's much more special, I feel, because she's much more younger, and she was brought under this world of torment. Best studio Naughty Dog. I think Naughty Dog has definitely shown they're a very skilled studio, but with The Last of Us, I feel like they show that they can do a phenomenal job in terms of bringing a very serious and dark story. And with that said, it also wins best story because it's just so dark, and and I feel like it's the best overall game of the year. It has a nice balance of action, not explosive action, but like, in terms of gameplay, it has nice action, it has good story, it has a nice pacing. But it only made it number two because while I think it's the best game, I have one that's my personal favorite game of the year, and yeah, it's a game that has been very mixed. Beyond Two Souls. Beyond Two Souls wins Best Cinematics, Best Acting Performance, Ellen Page, and my personal Game of the Year. Beyond Two Souls has been a very mixed reviewed game. A lot of people love it, or a lot of people hate it. You don't really see many people around the middle. My two brothers have played it and they really love it. I love it. What's interesting about this game compared to other games that I played this year is that with the other games, like BioShock, The Last of Us, I replayed those games because I went back for trophies and collectibles. But for Beyond Two Souls, I only played it once, and I went back just for a little bit to see the endings, but I didn't go back to replay the whole thing. I just went back just to see the endings, but a part of me wants to go back and replay it for trophies and see other possibilities to the story. But I don't know, like I feel like that's gonna ruin the experience for me because that one playthrough alone was so special, and the story is very convoluted with a bunch of things. Like it explores themes of the supernatural and the afterlife, and ghosts and entities, but it also deals with personal matters like love and loss, and in some weird way it kind of combines fairly well. And a lot of it has to do, I guess, I mean, the writing is kind of jumbled a little bit because the story itself is jumbled in a weird way, because in the game you're like, at first you're old Jody, and then on the next scene all of a sudden you're kid Jody Holmes. Yeah, to a lot of people that was a turnoff, but to me that was interesting because that created a diverse aspect of gameplay. Because at first you could be, just doing dialogue stuff, and then at the next point you could be in an action sequence. And so yeah, it has its pacing issues, but I think is such a beautiful game. I mean, Jodie, Ellen Page's character, is such a great character. She's a character that is very tortured. She's been bullied. I'm not gonna spoil much, but she just been brought with so much hatred and loss and abandonment, and she feels she's isolated because she has this entity that's with her and it's not making her live a normal life, even though she's a normal person that wants normal needs and wants. And the supporting cast of characters are also really good. Dr. Dawkins and Willem Dafoe's character is really good, and a lot of the other side characters work really well, whether it's supporting Ellen Page's character or going against her character. And there's some characters that really don't matter, that are really pointless, but for the most part the characters here kind of matter. And what I really love about it is that in the end of the game you get to decide if everything you did sort of matters, because you meet certain characters and you go through certain situations, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but in the end you get to decide if any of the relationships you made matter to you, and you get to decide which path you go to. And I feel like it's a really special game. It's very underrated. It's overrated in a way where people have their criticisms, and it's very mixed reviewed. But in terms of the love for it and as a game itself, is pretty underrated, and I definitely recommend it. I know GameSpot and Rift 3 Games has said great things about it, and I hope they win some, professional game of the years. But to me, it's my personal game of the year. It's a very special game. That one playthrough alone was very special to me. I know I'm getting redundant with my language, but again, To me, best like the to me it wins best cinematics. It looks cinematically, it looks very good. It's shot very well, and it's not just, it doesn't really have cutscenes because the cutscenes are the game scenes, but even when you're playing the game, the camera work is really good. It's also best performance by Ellen Page. She does a phenomenal job playing this character, and I'm pretty sure it was a difficult job playing that character because there's so many different moods and tones to it that probably she had to, kind of have to jumbled along the way the script is jumbled. And again, my personal game of the year is very beautiful. I definitely recommend you check them out. I mean, a lot of these games, like The Last of Us, BioShock, Grand Theft Auto, those games I feel like are worth buying because they have a lot of value. But Beyond Two Souls, since it's so mixed, I'll probably tell you to rent it first before you buy it. And if you love it, then buy it. But yeah, that's it. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed my top 10 2013 games and my awards for them. What do you think are your best games, or at least memorable games of the year? It's been a very interesting year, and next year it looks like it's going to be such as interesting as it was this year. So thanks for watching, and have a good day.